the image of that apparition woman was real, but it wasn't true, meaning it wasn't from Allah. Men being able to pierce their skull with swords and not feel it, to lay on beds of nails, to hold their mouths open and put things through their mouths and to put them through their brain, to bring them back out, to cut their own heads off and put them back on. All these to saw themselves in half and to then put themselves back together. To go underwater for 6, 7, 8 weeks and come back out. To make the Statue of Liberty disappear, to levitate Ferraris, to make African elephants go high and then come back down, to fly themselves and take off into flight without apparatus for flying and come back. Of course those things happen. They can be empirically tested that they happened. There's no dispute with that. Are they true? No. Because they're coming from another source. And that source is demonic. Remember, every miracle and every wonder glorifies Allah. And it always calls the person to see it, either by the person or the action itself, to go to Allah. So when the Prophet does the miracle and he says, I've given you all this food, he's doing what? He's feeding the people, but he's also calling them to Allah. How would levitating a Ferrari call people predicting the stock market rise? How would that, the levitation of an African elephant, how would that glorify Allah and call people to greater faith, making the Statue of Liberty disappear? I mean, that could have been done before it even got there, let alone making it disappear. Why would that be something that glorified Allah? It's not. These are parlor tricks. Shaitan specifies in the wicked and the dastardly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends his prophets to specialize in the wondrous and the righteous. So when you look at a false prophet like Satya Sai Baba and contrast him, or Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian, and contrast him with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, look at the signs that they're each bringing. These are totally different. Totally different. Yes?
One final point. You mentioned Al-Adl and in relation or in the same statement as the recent earthquake. What would you have to say in relation to that being from the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and also being a natural phenomena, as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam referred to when an eclipse occurred, and he pointed out to the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum that this was nothing other than a phenomenon.
Okay. Question is regarding the earthquakes that have occurred, particularly the recent earthquake, and whether this would be viewed as the qadr of Allah and a sign of His, and how we contrast that with the statement of the Prophet ﷺ when his son Ibrahim alayhi died, and it was said that there was an eclipse, and he said, the sun and the moon are two signs of Allah. They do not eclipse at the birth or death of anyone. When you see them eclipse, you should pray and remember Allah. It's hadith in Sahih al-Jami. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. The how of earthquakes and their mechanics, the molten lava, the plate tectonic plates, the San Juan de Fuca plate moving, and all these other things, those are the hows and the mechanics. The whys of earthquakes, and when you read in the Qur'an and the Sunnah, earthquakes are understood as to either be harbingers of a fitna that is to come, a punishment from Allah, or a post-fitna warning or summing up of things. When you look in Surah Al-Hajj, the 22nd surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us, Ya ayyuhan nasu ttaqu rabbakum, O humanity, fear your Lord. Inna zalzalat as-sa'a, indeed, the tremendous earthquake to come at the time of the day of resurrection, shay'un azim, is a serious thing indeed. That's the first two ayat of Surah Al-Hajj. It's mentioned again in other surahs. It's at the onset, before or after punishment from Allah. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu and Aisha radiallahu anha, our mother, connected it with the rise in abundant sins, particularly homosexuality. and also the rise in cults. Remember the Prophet ﷺ when he sat in Aisha's house and he faced the land of Najd, al-Yamama, and he called it a land of al-fitan wa zalazil, tribulations and major earthquakes, the hadith in Bukhari. So earthquakes they're from the qadr of Allah, that's true, but they also, the why of why they happen is connected with fitan, tribulation, punishment, adab, increase in sins like homosexuality and cult. So we make the direct connection. Now, was everyone hit necessarily under the punishment of Allah? No, because some people hit, like the children, like righteous Muslims that were in Japan. There are about 1 million of them out there, 1 million Muslims in Japan. Some of them were hit and they had the martyrdom. And they come and they will be able to make intercession for 70 members of their family as per the hadith in the Sahih of Bukhari. That's true. Some are from everlasting to everlasting. And you have the nuclear reactor there, which is seated on a fault line. And there's a fissure in the fault line. And the greatest country on earth, as it calls itself, is reduced to using Apache helicopters with massive buckets, dumping them into ocean water, flying over the nuclear reactor, and then dumping the buckets over the nuclear reactor. That's the best that America can muster against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's qudra. There's just no escape from it. So the earthquakes and these things are Allah's announcement that fitan are to come, fitan have come, or post-fitan regarding the day of resurrection. Now we've seen a 9.0 quake. The largest quake that we have on history, since they've started recording them by seismograph and seismographical computations, was a 9.5 that destroyed the Toltec civilization and sent a fissure down the whole of the continent of South America. This earthquake was actually so serious it caused earthquakes in other parts of the earth. It was actually felt across the world and caused tsunamis in other parts of the world where it hadn't even touched. To show that some scientists have said maybe the 2004 quake was a pre-quake of this one to come. That's how serious that quake. It was a 9.0. A 9.0 quake. That moved the island of Japan 50 feet closer to the United States. If the San Juan de Fuca plate had snapped under the pressure of that, it would have sent a wall of water on both sides that would have devastated the West Coast, which is not losing much, of the United States, and the rest of Southeast Asia, and inundated the coastlines. It only buckled, which means that you've lost about 100,000 acres of shoreline across the world. Now, when you go to the beach, you'll say, I'm sure there was more space for the kids to play, and you'll be able to actually see the effects of these earthquakes. Have a massive effect. So one of the people out there that's working at the Seaside Laboratory and also one in Astoria, one of the teachers, I suppose my sheikh in geology, Brian Harrison, is doing a lot of work with a lot of the other people looking at the seismic activity, the geological foundations, and everything else what's going on. That's why I advised you to take a look at the New Scientist magazine, because they're only telling you the mechanics, but Allah and His Messenger tell you why. Yes. So inshallah we will end on that note, and inshallah we will see you next week. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم أستغفر الله إن الله غفور رحيم يرحم الراحمين سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وأشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك إنه غفور رحيم يرحم الراحمين ولا إله إلا الله. السلام عليكم.